Hi, welcome to Give Me the Bible, where God's Word speaks for itself. Well, now that I've already done the really meaty chapters in Romans, chapters 9 through 11, I thought, why not just start at the very beginning? Let's just go back and cover the whole book of Romans together. And I realize that process may take months to do, so I will be kind of interjecting other videos along the way. But I just want us to see the big picture of Romans, to go through this letter, because I think as you see the bigger picture, you'll see chapters 9 through 11, those videos that I did on those sections really come to life even more. And I realized when I did those videos, the video length was much longer. I was up in like the 19-minute range. I'm really going to try to shorten the videos under 10 minutes to try to make them more digestible and easier to fit in your busy schedule. So let's talk about Romans as a whole. Let's just do an introduction to this book. Anytime you talk about introduction, you want to know, who wrote it? Why did they write it? When did they write it? What was really going on in the historical setting at the time? So look in Acts chapter 20. This is where we're going to begin. In Acts chapter 20, Paul is on the last leg of his third missionary journey. He's on the tail end of that journey. And one of the main reasons for that journey was to take up a financial collection from all of these Gentile churches and bring them to these needy Christians in Jerusalem who were suffering from poverty. And in Acts 20, notice he goes to Macedonia in verse 1, and then in verse 2 it says, when he had gone through those districts and had given them much exhortation, he came to Greece, and there he spent 3 months. So at the tail end of his journey, Paul actually leaves Ephesus, where he was for 3 years. He goes to Macedonia, and then he comes to Greece. Now Greece, another name for that region was Achaia, and that's where the city of Corinth was located. Now, the reason I bring that up is because when Paul was in Macedonia in verse 1 of Acts 20, that's when he wrote 2 Corinthians. He wrote this second letter to the Corinthians, and he told them, I'm getting ready to come to you for a third time to take up this financial collection. So that's presumably exactly what's going on here when he comes to Greece in Acts 20 and verse 2. He's going to the city of Corinth to, encourage them and to take up that financial collection. And he was there for a period of 3 months. This is believed to be the time when Paul wrote the letter to the Roman Christians from the city of Corinth at the end of his third missionary journey. And if you do the math on that, it was roughly 56, 57 AD when he wrote Romans. Now we get a little bit of a clue that Paul was actually in the city of Corinth when you go to Romans 16. A lot of times you can get clues about the letter from the beginning of a letter and the end of a letter. And so in Romans 16, in verse 23, it says, Gaius, host to me and to the whole church, greets you. And Erastus, the city treasurer, greets you, and Quartus, the brother. So Paul mentions a man named Gaius who is hosting the church in his house. Interestingly, in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul mentions Gaius as one of the original Corinthian converts. So it's very possible that this is the same Gaius that Paul was talking about in 1 Corinthians, hosting the church in his house. Not only that, but he mentions Erastus. Now, interestingly, we made an archaeological discovery with an inscription of a man named Erastus in the city of Corinth. And we made this discovery, the discovery was dated back to around 50 or 51 AD. And it mentions Erastus as an aedile, which was basically a kind of somebody in charge of public works. It was the job that you would have to have before you became a city treasurer. So interestingly, if Erastus was aedile in 50 or 51 AD, it makes sense 6 years later when Paul writes Romans that now he has kind of been promoted and now he is city treasurer. So that's a big clue that Paul's writing from Corinth. But here's the other clue that he's writing from Corinth at the end of that third missionary journey. Look in Romans 15. Look what he says in Romans 15:25. But now I am going to Jerusalem serving the saints. For Macedonia and Achaia have been pleased to make a contribution for the poor among the saints in Jerusalem. So there you have it. He's talking about his mission on that third missionary journey to take up that collection and go to Jerusalem, bring that money. And he says Macedonia and Achaia, or Greece, have been pleased to make a contribution. This is where Paul is. He's in Greece right now, writing this letter from the city of Corinth around 57 AD. Now, the next question is, why is he writing this letter? Let me give you 3 basic reasons. Number 1, to promote unity between Jewish and Gentile Christians. You see, the Roman churches started out, it could be one, let me just make a sidebar here. We're not 100% sure when it says Romans if Paul is writing to just one church in particular or several local churches in Rome. Not 100% sure. He doesn't really specify in this letter. So either the church or the churches were established by Jews at first, because when you go back to Acts 2 on the day of Pentecost, you actually had visitors there from Rome. And so once those Roman Jews became Christians there on the day of Pentecost, 3,000 were baptized into the Lord. Well, presumably they would have gone back home to Rome, spread the gospel there, planted churches there. So all these churches in Rome started out as Jewish churches. Well, what happened was Jewish Christians and Jewish non-Christians really butted heads. Non-Christian Jews thought it was just blasphemous that these Christian Jews were worshiping Jesus, this carpenter, this crucified criminal. And so they were just always going at it. And Claudius, the emperor of Rome, had enough. In 49 AD, he said, I don't care, Christian, non-Christian, whatever. If you're Jewish, you get out of my city. And all of the Jews were expelled from Rome. In Acts 18, it actually mentions this. In Acts 18, and this is earlier on in Paul's ministry, and it says in verse 2 of Acts 18, he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, having recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had commanded all the Jews to leave Rome. So the Bible mentions this. This was the year AD 49. He kicks all the Jews out. Well, the Jews are gone from Rome until a new emperor comes to the throne. That emperor's name is Nero, and he came to the throne around 54 AD. So about 5 years, 6 years, the Jews were completely cast out of Rome, but then under Nero, they get to return to Rome. Well, what happens now when these Jewish Christians go back home and they find the church is now largely run by Gentiles? The Jews are now looking at this like, hey, what do they think they're doing? They're not really focusing on the law of Moses at all. They don't seem to care about the clean and unclean food laws or keeping holy days or festivals or any of that stuff. And so the Jews are looking down their noses at the Gentiles, thinking that they're morally inferior in some way. And then the Gentiles, they got all these Jewish Christians coming back and they're being judged by the Jews, and the Gentiles are thinking, you guys are being ridiculous. Like, who cares about the law of Moses? Why does any of this even matter? And so there's all this tension and hostility. And so Paul writes this letter to bridge that gap, to create unity between those Jewish and Gentile Christians. And the main way that he does that is by showing that salvation is through Jesus, our faith in him, not through the works of the law of Moses. That's really the main message of Romans, is that our justification, we are justified, we are made right with God on the basis of our faith in Jesus, not on the basis of living as a Jew under the law of Moses. Once Paul can kind of dethrone the law of Moses from its elevated position in the mind of the Jewish Christians, that's going to remove a huge barrier and help them worship together, get along in unity in the Lord. Second reason he writes it is that the churches presumably were established in the 30s AD, let's just say a few years after the day of Pentecost. Let's just say 35 AD. We don't know 100%, when they were established, but let's just say 35 AD the churches were established. Well, this is 22 years later, and Paul has never once been to visit these Christians. So if you're these Christians in Rome, you're thinking, what, does Paul just not care about us? What, do we just chop liver? He's going on all these journeys and he doesn't even come to see us. And so Paul writes Romans to assure the Christians that he longs to see them. He says in Romans 1 and verse 11 that he longs to see them, to impart some spiritual gift to them. And then he explains in Romans 15 that actually for many years he had wanted to come to them, but the reason he didn't, notice Romans 15 and verse 20, he says, Romans 15:20, I aspired to preach the gospel not where Christ was already named, so that I would not build on another man's foundation. In other words, the reason I haven't come to you is because you guys already have the gospel. You guys have already heard Christ preached to you. I need to go to these other regions. I've had to spend time spreading the gospel to these other regions that haven't heard about Jesus. That was why he hadn't been to Rome, and he wants to clear that up. And the third reason that he writes this letter, first, you've got to promote unity between Jews and Gentiles. Secondly, to assure them he longs to see them. Thirdly, because Paul wants them to actually support him financially on his ministry to Spain. He wants to go past Rome and go farther west of the empire into Spain, and he wants the Romans to help him. Look in Romans 15, let's just continue. Verse 22, for this reason I have often been prevented from coming to you. But now, with no further place for me in these regions, and since I have had for many years a longing to come to you whenever I go to Spain, for I hope to see you in passing and to be helped on my way there by you, when I have at first enjoyed your company for a while. But now I'm going to Jerusalem serving the saints. You see that? I want to go to Spain, and I want to be helped on my way there by you. Now here's the thing. If you're a church today and a preacher asks you for money to support his ministry, what's the first thing you want to know? What is this guy preaching? Is he preaching false doctrine? I mean, what's going on? There was a lot of false rumors about Paul that had been spread by his enemies throughout the Roman world at that time. And so what Paul does is he writes Romans as an encapsulation of the gospel message that he preaches. This is what I'm proclaiming. I want you to know for sure, this is the message that I'm bringing, that we are justified on the basis of faith in Jesus, not by our works of the law of Moses, living as a Jew. That is what I'm preaching, and hopefully that would then give the Christians comfort to know, okay, this is what Paul's all about. You know, the false rumors aren't true. We can support him. We can absolutely help him financially on his way to Spain. So that's the big picture of Romans. I know I went over my 10-minute mark. I'm at 12 now. Got to give me some grace. I've been at 19. It's going to take me some time to whittle it down. But thank you so much for your patience. And I pray that this video was helpful to you and that this whole study of Romans will be a blessing in your life. Lord willing, I'll see you next time.